Today's scripture reading is from the book of Acts, chapter 16, verses 11 to 15. And in the Bibles in the pews, this is on page 125 of the New Testament. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Skaneateles, the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira. Thank you. And a dealer in purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. When she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. The word of the Lord.
Tom, thank you. Our gospel passage comes to us from the 17th chapter of the book of John. After Jesus had spoken these words, he looked up to heaven, and he said, "I have made your name known to those whom you gave me from the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have kept your word. Now they know that everything that you have given me is from you. For the words that you gave to me I have given to them, and they have received them, and they know in truth that I came from you, and they have believed that you sent me. I'm asking on their behalf. I'm not asking on behalf of the world, but on behalf of those whom you gave me, because they are yours. All mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been glorified in them. And now I'm no longer in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one, as we are one. While I was with them, I protected them in your name that you have given me. I guarded them, and not one of them was lost except the one destined to be lost, so that the scripture might be fulfilled. But now I am coming to you, and I speak these things in the world so that they may have my joy made complete in themselves. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, because they do not belong to the world. So just as I do not belong to the world. I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask that you protect them from the evil one. They do not belong to the world, just as I do not belong to the world. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. And as for their sakes, I sanctify myself, so that they also may be sanctified in truth. I ask not only on behalf of these, but also on behalf of those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one. As you, Father, are in me and I in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one, as we are one. I in them and you in me, that they may become completely one, so that the world may know that you have sent me and have loved them, even as you have loved me. Father, I desire that those also whom you have given me may be with me where I am, to see my glory, which you have given me because you loved me before the foundation of the world. Righteous Father, the world does not know you, but I do know you, and these know you and know that you sent me. I made you known to them, and I will make it known so that the love with which you have loved me may be in them, and I may be in them. So end our readings for this day. Last Sunday, in the Gospel of John, and this morning in the Gospel of John, we have this description that seems to turn everything that everyone believes about Christianity on its head. The world believes that Christianity is hard, that Christianity means that you have to follow a more strict path than all the rest of the world does. What Jesus describes is it's actually easier for you than for the rest of the world. All the world, all humanity, all creation of every nation in all time belongs to God. But you have had the Christ, who gives you a foretaste of what that's all about and helps you to realize just how precious and how wonderful relationship with God is, how much you are loved. And this makes this life easier because we realize that the creation that is coming as this world is made into the creation, the kingdom of heaven, we already have a foretaste. We already have an understanding of who God is and that we are known and loved. This week we've had 2 memorial services, and in each one I said the same thing. This stinks. These sons of a father will come to graduation at high school, and their father will not be there as they want. They'll walk up the aisle at their weddings, and their father will not be there as they want. The grandchildren of a grandmother, when they get married, when they have children and want them to know their grandmother, their great-grandmother, will not be able to as they want. And the most important part of all of that is not all the places that we won't be, but that in each one, they're wanted. They want their father. They want their grandmother. Even for just one more moment, all of us who've known a death wish that we had one more moment with them. In a world where so many are unwanted, in a world where so many are orphaned, in a world where we say such hurtful, hateful things to each other, to realize that we are wanted, to know that we are loved, that makes all the difference. In the Garden at Gethsemane, after the Last Supper, Jesus describes that there's no separation between us. Everything that has been shared, you've taken in, and it's become a part of who you are. This week, I saw something that I had not seen before. Mario was introduced not simply as Reverend Bolivar or as our associate pastor, but as Dante's daddy. That's our identity. As Dante's described, you're all mothers. We all have come to claim each other. When the Sudanese refugees came into our congregation originally, we thought we were doing a great thing for them, and Jack, you became the grandfather. And though I had already been here as pastor for 5 years, suddenly I became the pastor and known as the pastor. Being a pastor doesn't simply mean that you break bread at communion or you pour the water at baptism or you officiate at weddings. It means a level of trust and relationship, that we can say hard things and we can say comfort when it needs to be. And we'll be there for each other. There is this relationship of trust between us, and needs to be. Many of you this morning have sent to your spouse or to your mother a Hallmark greeting about what it is to be a Hallmark mother. You know what I'm meaning, those sentimentally drippy cards that reek of perfume and are covered in lace. Those cards that you get at the grocery store that say how wonderful mom is. I'm not saying that you're not. What I'm saying is that I know for a fact how many of these mothers there are among us this morning, male and female. This week I was over at the post office and saw one of the Hallmark cards that depicted a supermom, like Superwoman, flying through space with a bag of groceries in one arm and her briefcase in the other. We're surrounded by professional women. We're surrounded by those who are highly educated, highly motivated, responsible for so much, and responsible for us as well. And yet I also know from listening to many of you that you weren't raised by the same kind of supermom. Sometimes our moms were hard to live with, even though we sent them those Hallmark cards. It's the height of irony that in the same year in which Dr. Spock published his baby book that described for all of us the instruction manual that we'd been looking for as to how you raise your child, there was a new individual presented to the world who was Mr. Spock, who was half human, and he overcame his humanity by logic. And we began to mix up the two, as if by treating our children with logic, by greater understanding, we would come to better know them, when really what it takes is to love, to be in relationship with each other, to be there in the hard times and in the good. I was blessed with having two moms. One died in my birth, the other chose to be mom. We took for granted what she did. She took tailoring classes so she could make matching suits for all four boys and our father. Tailored suits. She sewed and knit sweaters for us so that every year we had two brand new sweaters, and we assumed that every mother did this. And the night in which Judy and I got married, she sat up all night long with me. It's that relationship, it's that trust that we place in each other that shapes us and encourages us to face the hard things, to face the circumstances that seem insurmountable, and changes from the way in which we were mothered into who we choose to be, that changes from whose we were to who we want to be. Tom did a fine job reading for us Acts. It's hard to pronounce all those names of all the different cities, but I encourage that we only read those first two verses because the rest of this chapter is an incredible novel. This is like Homer's The Odyssey or the Iliad. In fact, it takes place in the very same cities 800 years after Homer. It is the first time in which Christianity is brought to the European world. And Paul and Silas, these missionaries, set out, remembering that Paul was the one who persecuted the Christians, and now he's one who everywhere he goes, he's setting people free from their bondage to believe in Jesus Christ. They come to the first city, and there they can't find a single Christian. There's no houses of worship. There's no Christians anywhere that they look. And so they go to look for a temple, and there's no temple, and there's no synagogue. There's no Jewish places of worship. And they go to the water's edge. Because throughout the scriptures, throughout the Bible of the Hebrews, throughout the Bible of the Christians, places of water are what carry the story of faith. In the beginning, the world was covered in water. With Noah and the flood, there was water. With Moses in the river Nile, with Moses separating the waters of the sea, with the Israelites weeping beside the waters in Babylon, with Jesus being baptized by John, with Jesus calming the storm, with Jesus feeding the 5,000. All of these are stories of faith related to the waters, so they go to the waters to pray, and as they're praying, there is this woman named Lydia who overhears them. And she is so moved that she becomes the first convert to Christianity in all of Europe. Lydia is an incredible character. She's odd in her world. She's foreign to what that world was like. It was a world in which women couldn't speak, not in public. A woman couldn't testify on her own behalf. She could not inherit. And Lydia owns her own business. Lydia is affluent. Lydia is prosperous. She owns her own home. Lydia is a seller of purple. In a world in which dye was uncommon, everything was gray. You had the wools that were washed and would naturally be a shade of gray, and you could then make them a little bit darker or a little bit bleached whiter. But how much lilac would you have to gather to boil down to make cloth into purple? Rich, dark purple. And she was a trader in purple. She was respected, she was esteemed, and she was the first convert to Christianity. In contrast to Lydia, there is a slave girl. And the day after, and all the days after, this slave girl follows Paul and Silas around. But instead of listening to them, she describes who they are. She's got a gift, an inborn gift of fortune telling, that she can look into a person's eyes and read their soul. So she follows them around, proclaiming to all the world that these are slaves of God Most High. These are the source of salvation for all of you. She's like caller ID, who follows them around, telling them who these people are. If you knew that this was a servant of God who is here to provide salvation, would you want to stop and talk with him? Or would you go in the opposite direction when Paul comes forward? Would you want to talk about salvation? And she's scaring people away. So finally, by the third day, getting incredibly tired of this, Paul turns around and casts the demon out of her, casts the spirit out of her. And suddenly she's set free. We have to wonder, though, sometimes there are things inside of us that enslave us. Our ideas, our ideology, our values. Sometimes we're enslaved by our relationships, by our businesses, by our titles. And she was a slave to two unnamed men who prostituted her for her gift that they could make money on. In the Bible, you always want to follow how people react to different circumstances. For these two men, when they suddenly discover that their profit has been taken away, they get angry, and they use the law for their benefit. There was not a law about if someone takes away your profit, you get to throw them in jail. Instead, they made up charges, and they had Paul and Silas arrested and publicly stripped and beaten and whipped and thrown into the darkest cell at the center of the prison. There, their feet put in the stocks. The stocks is a strange method of torture. It didn't hurt. It's wood with two holes in it and a hole usually for your head so that you'd be in the city center and be made into a mockery. But here, to make it so much worse, they put Paul and Silas's feet through it so that they'll hang upside down and their heads will be down next to the dirt. But they do so in the center of the prison where no one's going to see them. So it didn't work. And Paul and Silas react. Remember, we said it depends on how you react as to how it affects your faith. For these two, they decided to sue. For Paul and Silas, they decided to sing hymns and to pray and to share stories of faith. It didn't give them greater understanding. It didn't give them greater wisdom. But instead, something did happen as they sang and they prayed and they worshiped together. The earth began to quake. It's like that opening hymn that we just sang about the power of the rainbow and the power of the stars and the power of the whale and the power of the earthquake all around us. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. And as a grade school student, we had many different drills. We had fire drills in which you ran outside. We had tornado drills in which you went into the center of the school, away from all the windows, and you crouched down against the walls. Having grown up in a time of fear of Russia and the Cold War, we also had nuclear bomb drills in which you opened up your desk and you put your head inside like an ostrich and you waited till it was all over. We always thought it was until the bomb was over. We didn't realize what it meant for it all to be over. When Paul and Silas were there in the center of the prison, they prayed and the earth began to quake, and it quaked so hard that their shackles broke open, and the doors broke open, and the walls came down. And there was a jailer, and his entire identity was about keeping prisoners in prison, keeping them locked up, keeping them in shackles. And with the earthquake, he suddenly realized there was no longer a prison to keep them in. There were no chains to hold them, and they would all escape. And he couldn't do his job. He couldn't fulfill his identity. His reality got shattered with the shattering of the walls and the chains. And he began to believe that what he needed to do was to kill himself. This is like retirement for too many, like divorce or like children graduating for too many of us. When we lose that identity, we're not sure who we are anymore, and we don't see a purpose in life. But Paul called out to him and described to him that it wasn't the chains and the walls that had held them, but instead they had stayed there because they had been accused, wrongly accused, and he didn't need to take his life. The jailer then responded with something that we so often fail to ask. What must I do? What must I do to be saved? And Paul responds, believe. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and you and your whole family will be cared for. And he takes them to his home and washes their wounds, and they baptize him and his family. And the next day, the magistrates come to haul them out of prison and to set them free, having been rebuked, and suddenly find out that they're not prisoners anymore, but also that originally they were Roman citizens with rights that have now been abused. And so the magistrates, the high and powerful magistrates of that city, bow down and apologize to Paul and to Silas. What all of this is about, in Jesus' words in the Garden of Gethsemane, as well as the story of Paul, is that all of us are connected. All of us share together in God's creation. And we are foreigners in a foreign world. We are aliens in an alien place. God formed this creation good. God formed this Garden of Eden for us, in which everything was interrelated, everything was in balance, everything was as it should be. But we were created in the image of God, and God's the creator, so we thought ourselves to be recreators. And we reformed the world in our image, with our control. And what we formed was death, and separation, and isolation. And God sent Christ into the world to create new Adams and new Eves, those who've had a foretaste of a relationship with God and how our relationship could be. The question is, which reality is going to win out? Stasis is going to happen. There's going to come a time in which nature will seek its balance. Will it be the original nature, or will it be the nature that we've created as human beings? Are we children of man, children of Adam, or are we children of God? It's hard to live a life in faith in this world today. We live in a 21st century time with great technology, with greater access to information than we've ever had before, with greater ability to obliterate the world than we've ever had before, and greater polarity. Will we seek peace? Will we seek faith? Or will we give up? Christ prayed to God that we would not give up, that we would not be alone, but that we would have the same love that he had.